Well, I have to say, this week's episode of Gotham was one I was not looking forward to because the promos would have us believe that not only were they going to introduce the Flying Graysons, but also they were going to introduce the Joker. Now, that's what the promos would lead you to believe, and for the most part, it is true. And when I saw those promos, I was just thinking to myself, this just reeks of desperation. It's like they're afraid to really go into unexplored territory. We have to go back to territory that has been well explored, that being Robin and, again, the Joker. But watching this episode, I actually did kind of enjoy it a little more than I thought I would. Granted, there are still some of the regular problems that hold it back from being something that I would wholeheartedly recommend. But again, there was enough good stuff here where I can safely say, I don't really feel like I entirely wasted my time. There's a recommendation for you. It's not an entire waste of time, but basically the plot of this one is Gordon and Tompkins, they go for a date at the circus. Okay, the circus is in town, except a fight breaks out, and it turns out that the fight is over a woman. It's between these two feuding families at the circus, the Lloyds, I think it was, and the Graysons. Which already I was kind of like, okay, so they're not entirely bopping us on the nose saying, get it, it's Robin. No, it's, I don't know, the way that they sort of incorporated the Graysons into this one as, just sort of as background characters. They didn't go out of their way to try and reference Batman, or in this case, Robin. So I actually thought the way that they incorporated the Graysons into the episode was actually pretty well done. Not too forced. But it turns out the woman that the fight was over was recently killed by an unknown assailant. And it's this snake charmer woman, or some woman. And so Gordon opens up an investigation where he's examining the members of the circus to see who killed this woman. So on the surface, it's pretty straightforward. And I'm going to get into spoilers eventually in this video, but first of all, more so than any other episode prior to this, I really got into and bought the relationship between Gordon and Dr. Tompkins. Their relationship shined here more so than any other episode prior. Not only does it help that Ben McKenzie and Morena Baccarin have pretty decent chemistry, but also we actually learned about Dr. Tompkins' personality and motivations more so than the other episodes, and seeing what both her and Gordon want out of this relationship, seeing them run into their first perils and pitfalls, really getting past the sort of flirtatious stage in the relationship that we've kind of been stuck in with them for the past few episodes. I actually am really starting to like them as a couple, and when Gordon's ex walked in at the end, and she just kind of left without a word, I basically just said to myself, yeah, that's right, go away. No one likes you. You suck as a character. Because really, what character traits does Barbara in this show have that would drive her to, or that would drive Gordon back to her when there's a perfectly good woman in Dr. Tompkins? Because we already know much more about Dr. Tompkins, and she has already established herself as a much more appealing character than Barbara Gordon, who is just honestly kind of a backstabber and kind of clingy. Really, really not a very well-written character like some of the other characters on the show. Speaking of which, Fish Mooney and Bruce Wayne, still don't care about them in the least. In fact, I really wish they would just go away. Fish Mooney is still in this unnamed prison, and apparently the people who run this unnamed prison don't know how to run a prison. Because basically Fish Mooney organizes these prisoners into this sort of unit. It's sort of Robin Hood-esque, or or they're basically on the verge of revolt, okay? And these guys periodically come down to get one or two prisoners because they need their organs, okay? Except Fish Mooney basically intimidates these guards into making a deal with the person in charge. Basically, one of the head of the guards stays down there with the prisoners by himself while Fish Mooney goes up to bargain with the leader of the prison. And already I'm thinking, okay, this makes no sense. Clearly you guys do not know the concept of an inmate and a guard, okay? Clearly you guys do not know the difference. The guards do not typically bargain with the inmates. Even if the inmates are really trying to threaten you or intimidate you, you still do not negotiate with them, okay? It was just so stupid and made no sense. It was just so contrived, and not only because of Jada Pinkett Smith's awful performance, but again, from a narrative perspective, it just made no sense. I mean, for someone like me, who I would like to think that I have some semblance of I have some sense of logic in my head, this whole scene was just so irritating and frustrating. Okay, if you want the prisoners to cooperate, then make them cooperate. You should have the power. Are you honestly telling me that the prison is run by like these 3 or 4 guards? I mean, do something. You have to have some way of keeping these prisoners in line. Okay, it should not be this easy for the prisoners to get their way. Man, that thing felt rushed and contrived. And another series of scenes that I didn't particularly care for. Again, it's almost reached the point where I can't even bring up the energy to be mad at it anymore, because young Bruce Wayne goes to the board of directors at Wayne Enterprises and he basically confronts them outright about their connections to the mob and the Arkham Project. Okay, first of all, you couldn't have eased that in a little more. You actually had to come out outright and say, I don't think any of you are necessarily on the level. I mean, I'm severely questioning you guys' credibility. First, yeah, that's real conspicuous. I'm sure you'll get stuff done then. Again, I realize this is just a kid, but even as a kid, this Bruce Wayne is not relatable. He is not very identifiable. He doesn't feel natural in the least. And the previous episode, I think, where he actually had that sort of emotional breakdown, I actually thought that was one of his best moments on the show because it felt natural. You felt like, hey, this is a grieving kid. Now he's back to doing his whole robot routine where I'll give you an example. One of the members of the board basically says like, those are some bold claims for a young man, and Bruce Wayne basically says, my age is not relevant, like a freaking android. God, I hate these two characters, Fish Mooney and Bruce Wayne. And Barbara, and what was with the scenes involving Barbara, Selina, and Ivy? Those scenes contributed nothing to the episode. We could have easily had Barbara walk in at the end, and the episode would have worked just as well. And I'm not saying that it would have made the character of Barbara any more likable, because the damage has been done at this point. But the scenes where she's basically trying on clothes to go and impress Jim, I was watching these scenes going, why are we here? This is not establishing anything we didn't already know. Barbara is insecure. Okay, we know that. But first of all, why doesn't she have a bit more of a reaction to two uninvited street guests in the building? And she just lets them stay. She lets them stay. This episode was just so filled with illogic. Okay. All right. So yeah, those really hurt the episode. But again, it was propped up, and it was made infinitely more watchable by the increasingly appealing relationship between Gordon and Leslie Tompkins. Because Leslie Tompkins, we've again, we learn more about her and why she and Gordon are attracted to each other. We learn more about those two things than we have any episode previously. Okay, and we like these two characters. I'm continuing to like these two characters, and the fact that Dr. Tompkins and Gordon really have this sort of ongoing negotiation about how involved she should get in his work. I actually am more invested in that than I thought I would be initially. And seeing her confronted with some of these psychos and admit, like, this is actually kind of thrilling. Again, is an interesting character trait, and one that actually sets up very well her future relationship with Batman, her as sort of this confidant, or this sympathetic figure in Batman's life. It actually sets that up pretty well. However, this is I just have to put a big spoiler warning here. Spoilers. I'm going to talk about the end of this episode. Okay, so at the end of this episode, it turns out that the snake charmer woman was killed by her son, Jerome, who is played by one of the kids from Shameless, the U.S. version of Shameless. And basically when this kid is confronted with these accusations, he acts all vulnerable and hurt for a little bit, but when basically everything comes clean, Gordon cites off all of his evidence and all of his accusations. And it's at that point in every police procedural where the villain comes clean, this kid, Jerome, puts his head down and slowly raises it up again, and he immediately turns into the Joker. Like, drop of a hat, he turns into the Joker, where he just starts laughing. He really, it's very Nicholson-esque, the way this kid portrays the Joker, which could be either a good thing or a bad thing depending on your point of view. Personally, I was never a huge fan of Nicholson's Joker, but I will say this: the somewhat lackluster way of introducing him and how they completely went without any kind of transition. That aside, this kid, I don't know his name. He actually did a really, really good job. I was actually kind of blown away by how well this kid portrayed a younger Joker. Performance-wise, there was absolutely nothing wrong with this guy as far as I was concerned. However, in terms of characterization and going back to the original mission statement of this show, you have to wonder, where can they possibly go with this character now? Because they've blown their load. All right, there's nowhere to go with this character at all between now and when he comes into contact with Batman, because he's already the Joker. A teenage Joker has already come full circle in sort of becoming the Joker. Because, like I said, he's basically channeling Jack Nicholson right out of the Batman '89 film. Okay, so I have to wonder, where is there to go with this character? He's already come full circle, and pretty sporadically, I might add, right out of nowhere. But I have to wonder. I thought it was the vat of chemicals that drove him insane, and I could very well be overthinking this, but the only way I could think of where they could possibly save this character and possibly include him again is to say, oh well, he's in therapy and this part of his personality has been repressed. The sort of Joker-esque personality is repressed and continues to be repressed until adulthood, where he starts working for the mob. And then one could possibly make the justification, oh, well, the vat of chemicals just sort of brought out a side of him that he hasn't embraced since his teenage years. Again, I could very well be overthinking it, but for a character like the Joker, who is a character I really love, I don't know, I think it's somewhat justified that I'm overthinking it. But especially with them introducing the Red Hoods, or the Red Hood gang, next week, this would have actually been an appropriate opportunity to to maybe stick with the persona of this very timid teenager, this very timid mama's boy, and have him sort of fall into the Red Hood gang. Maybe do sort of a continuous arc with him. But no, he's immediately the Joker, which in retrospect shows the lack of subtlety on this show. And again, I can't really think of anywhere left to go with this character. Speaking of which, the Penguin, he basically remains stagnant throughout this episode. Again, nothing really wrong with the performance. Robin Lord Taylor is still playing him perfectly fine, and Carol Kane is a lot of fun as always as his mom. But the Penguin has Fish Mooney's nightclub, and really there was no advancement for him. There was nothing for him to do this episode. He was just kind of running Fish's nightclub and doing a piss poor job at it. Okay, so there was really nothing for him to do this episode, and for a character like the Penguin, who is known for running these clubs, or at least nowadays he's known for being I'm trying to think of the phrase, for putting on this illusion of a legitimate businessman by running these clubs. And seeing as Penguin has already attained Fish Mooney's club in this, again, I don't know where they can possibly go. So, yeah, this episode was a very mixed bag. I enjoyed parts of it. And on the other hand, some parts really frustrated me. But I'm still sticking with this show, especially since the season is almost over. I have to see where they're going to go from here in order to properly judge the quality of this show, or at least season 1 of this show. So, yeah, we'll just see what happens.